that 1 in 10 employees, 10% of the workplace, is actively struggling with untreated substance use disorder today.
And the most free person in the world is the one with nothing to hide. Welcome, everyone, to this month's edition of the monthly Fireside Chat. And I am really, really excited about this particular episode because we have Marin Nelson here, and her and I work together at Salesforce and in a very unique capacity. She wasn't my RVP. We weren't on the same team. We were actually part of an organization that she founded called Sobrynth. And so I wanted to have her on the show today, mainly because addiction is on the rise in sales, and it's often misunderstood. There's a lot of stigma around the word addiction, and what we both want to do is normalize and destigmatize what it means to struggle with addiction. And there's no one better to have to discuss this topic than Marin. So I'm going to do a little background and then we'll dive right in. Marin's the CEO and she's the co-founder of Sobrynth, which provides 24/7 assistance for employees and their families who are seeking support with immediate addiction needs and for any employees who are sober curious. She and I worked together at Salesforce. She was an RVP and she had just co-founded the Soberforce employee resource group in November 2020. I had gotten sober that year in February of 2020. And Salesforce offered a place for support, for inspiration, and for connection with a lot of other Salesforce employees that were also on the sobriety journey. And I wanted to bring her on because addiction is so common in the high pressure world of sales, where people are often turning to vices or other escape mechanisms to deal with the stress, the anxiety, and the pressure that comes with sales. And so both of us are deeply aligned on the mission to help everyone get the support they need, especially when it comes to any kind of substance or process abuse. And on a personal note, I think I've shared this with a lot of people, but I was a very highly functioning addict in my sales career. And I know Marin was too. And a lot of times people associate addiction with someone who's in the gutter, who's hit a rock bottom. And I was dealing with this for most of my adult life in silence and dealing with shame and secrecy. And so if people can see, successful people like Marin and myself, leaders that can really normalize this, they can know that it's not just the person in the gutter, the person struggling that doesn't look like you, and make it a lot more relatable for successful people who also have their struggles. So welcome, and I'm so glad to have you here, Marin.
Thank you so much for that introduction. Thanks everyone for joining for this conversation. It's great to be here. And yes, Ian and I had the privilege of meeting early days. You were one of the first people to join Soberforce when we launched November 2020. And you also, I'm excited for you to talk about your story and I'll talk about my story because you helped to broaden who we were there to serve right out of the gate. And that was really important in the spirit of building community for employees wherever they are in their journey, right? And whatever the thing is that they're struggling with, that we really wanted to create this inclusive community to, as you said, normalize recovery and destigmatize addiction. So I'm really glad to be here for this conversation with
I
you.
like that you said whatever they're struggling with, because there's a variety of things that people struggle with, right?
Yeah, exactly. Like it is not. So when we started, we all bring our own personal stories. And so for me, I've been in recovery from alcoholism, and other drug addiction for 19 years. I got sober when I was 24. So my whole career has really been sober. I got sober pretty young, and that was a gift. I had examples of recovery in my life. And so I saw a very successful dad who had been sober since I was 7, really successful uncles who had been sober before I was born, and another family member who was still actively drinking. And so for me, I really was saved for what could have been easily another decade of using because I saw that there was another way. And so my hope in creating this company and the reason behind creating Soberforce was wanting to show other people what recovery looks like and that you can choose what your bottom is, right? And so your bottom doesn't need to be any worse than wherever you are right now. Like that can be enough to say, I'm calling it quits, or to say, you know what, I'm going to explore what sober curiosity looks like, right? Like it doesn't have to be an abstinence only path either. For me, it is, but for lots of people, just like reducing use or changing use is really meaningful.
I agree 100%. I just hosted a mastermind and people say, Ian, maybe you're not sober. You were having a glass of wine. That was never my addiction, right? My addiction was pornography and compulsive sexual behavior. And that fundamentally is something that carries a lot of stigma, but I'm seeing it
Mhm.
more and more than ever as those things become normalized. And for me, I don't watch porn. It's not about anything that I'm judging with other people, but for me and for my marriage and my integrity with my faith and my value system, it doesn't serve me or anyone in my family. And unfortunately, I come from a family of addicts, right? And
Mhm.
that was the thing that I started with. And then it turned into, wait a minute, getting drunk doesn't serve me. And I haven't been drunk in 4.5 years. And wait a minute, smoking weed, this probably doesn't fit. And finally it was Adderall. So it's been a journey, but there's typically one thing that is the dominant thing that tends to haunt people, or that I've seen has been their thing that they really do want to call it quits with entirely. I don't know if that's your experience or what you've seen with Sober Force as we think about addictive personalities and how it can translate to different types of addiction. Is that kind of what you've seen too?
Totally. I mean, for me, when I got sober at 24, I went into 12-step rooms because that's what my dad and my uncles had done. So it's what I knew to do. And there weren't really other options 24 years ago or 19 years ago.
Mhm.
It was pretty much that, right? Or treatment. And now there's a lot of other pathways, which is awesome because I think it's really important to figure out like what is your path and what is the support that you need and find the places of community to support you on your goals. Like that fundamentally is, I think, the key is having community of people who understand, who have lived through it, who have come out the other side. But there are lots of pathways to go. So for me, mine is around drugs and alcohol, like no option, no, like that I can't touch it. It doesn't work for me. And the insidiousness of substance use disorder for me and being in recovery from alcoholism is that I still 19 years later will have moments where I see a glass of wine and I'm like, oh, that can't be that bad. It's like my brain still will want to go there. And I'm like, nope, it is that bad. It was never cute. It was never a good look. And you would literally destroy your entire life if you picked up. For me, that's my truth. But I love what you said about like for you, what your truth is and what spaces are not safe for you that you can't go to, right? But other ones that are safe. And I think that's what's really important about this journey for everyone is figuring out like where, because it's a spectrum, right? And it's like, where are you on that spectrum? And how giving permission, I think, just to opt out sooner is my hope, which is why we really leaned into the sober curious language at
Mhm.
Sober Force because we wanted to bring everyone into the conversation. Because I really believe that's the only way we change culture is when you have sober allies and sober curious individuals and people who are in recovery and family members of who are all talking about this together.
Mhm. So what does it mean to be sober curious?
So, sober curious could be I'm curious about the relationship I have with alcohol or drugs or other substances or other addictions, right? Like, I'm curious about what this is and is this serving me? Is this how I want to be showing up? Do I want to pull back in my use? So, I think it's that space of evaluating what your relationship is with whatever the thing is, whether it's a substance or a behavior to explore, is this what I want? Does this work for me?
Mhm.
Right. And so there's lots of, when it comes to drugs and alcohol, there are lots of movements now around dry January, sober October. But it could be, again, for any addiction, right? Like you could apply that thinking of like, I'm going to take a break. And can I successfully do that? And what is that? What do I feel like when I'm in that space? And what's interesting to watch is like some people go through that and then say, yeah, I just like found out that like I just want to use less or engage less in this activity. And
Mhm.
others go through and go, gosh, that was really hard and I'm really struggling to like honor this goal I set. So maybe I need more support. Maybe I need more help.
I love that because you mentioned two things that I want to dive a little bit deeper on. Number one is, does it serve me? You said, is this serving me? And if we're trying to be the best versions of ourselves, we're going to have to shed the old identity. We're going to have to shed the things that no longer serve us. And a lot of times that has to do with vices, right? It could be, I'll give you a great example, video game. I had a guy who was playing games as a way to escape and medicate and getting a lot of dopamine from it, and it crept into his workday. And when we took away the PlayStation and removed it, he tripled his sales results because he had to focus and sit with himself, and it wasn't constant breaks. And so it doesn't have to be, again, the traditional alcohol or drugs. It could be anything that doesn't serve you, number one, and is pulling you away from your goals. Number two, which you said is, how do I feel? What's my relationship with this particular thing, right? In my opinion, it's not my opinion, it's, there's a lot of science behind it, but the lowest emotional grade possible, worse than sadness or anger or bitterness or rage, is shame.
Mm.
Shame is one of the lowest grade emotions that the humanity has. And when you're feeling shame, you can't show up confident. You can't show up grateful. You can't show up in your best self. And if you have shame around any of your activities after you do it, right? If you're feeling ashamed, if you're feeling you're beating yourself up, you don't want to do it, and you keep repeating and you get in that shame cycle, that can have a detrimental effect. So if your relationship's okay and you don't feel ashamed, it's not something you're trying to stop, great, keep doing what you're doing. But if it's really causing you to feel shameful about this type of behavior, then it's probably a time to get sober curious. Is that kind of how you think about it too?
I am like, yeah, I just had like a total flashback to being 23 in New York. I worked at a nonprofit healthcare is where I started my career, and I'm at a company retreat and it's free wine, open bar,
Mhm.
everyone's drinking. So just to call out, listen, we're everywhere. So yes, sales is high pressure, so higher risk of addiction and substance use disorder, and also plenty of people in the nonprofit space too. Plenty of people in media, plenty of people, right? Fill in the blank. Like there's 46 million who are suffering right now with substance use disorder
Wow.
in the
Is
United
that,
States. And that's just substance use disorder. That's not all the other addictions. 46
mm,
million. Anyways, I was having a flashback to being at this event, being very intoxicated. And that shame, when you talked about that shame, I could just feel it in my body of stumbling back to my room and being so freaked out that a customer was going to see me because this was a customer event that we were hosting, and waking up the next day and being like, oh my God, what did I say? Who saw me? Did anyone see me? What are they going to think of me?
mhm,
And I, as a sober individual, have witnessed those situations at sales kickoffs and conferences and client dinners where someone overindulges, probably someone who's like me, who is not safe drinking but hasn't figured out how to stop yet, right? And you can just see the shame. You can feel it the next morning at the breakfast.
mhm, mhm.
And it's like, for me, it's like that's such the driver behind the bringing this to the workplace and this
Yeah.
conversation is because that is where we are. And we all as colleagues see it. And you probably can think of someone you know who's probably struggling, but we don't say anything because we don't know what to say. We're scared we're going to say the wrong thing. We don't know how to be helpful. And so then we just don't acknowledge it. But it's like everyone saw that person last night stumbling back to the hotel.
Mhm.
And that to me is just what feels like not a loving way to be in this world. And I recognize that people have to choose to get help. I can't save anyone but
Yeah.
myself, but I can help others with the words to use to express concern to a colleague or a loved one and to help us find each other, right? So that you can show up at that kickoff and not feel like you have to navigate it alone as a freshly sober person.
Mhm.
Like building community in the workplace is so important because then we can just help each other walk through those events together.
You're bringing up so much stuff for me, and I'm not going to make this about me. It's going to be about everyone else and getting people help. But you just brought some flashbacks back to some things I've been very ashamed of, and alcohol was always that trigger to behave badly or judgment going out the window, and it's very real. And it starts, right? That's why when I stopped pouring, I also stopped getting drunk because that didn't, help the cause, right?
Right.
So fundamentally, you're talking about essentially a core part of sales for many cultures, right? For SKOs, for client events. I get this question a lot is like, what if I don't want to drink? But it's such a big part of my entertaining clients or going golfing or going like, I
Mm.
feel like I can't be social or I feel like I, would be, different if I'm not drinking. I'm just curious, have you come across that a lot? And what do you say to reps that genuinely um, feel like they won't be able to perform their job in those settings if they're not,
Oh,
participating?
thank you for this question. So We actually heard this a lot in Soberforce. So Soberforce, just to rewind, I think we alluded to it, but it was an employee resource group that I co-founded, was president for at Salesforce in 2020. And the intention was to create community for sober, sober curious, sober allies to destigmatize addiction, normalize recovery, help us find each other, help people get help sooner. And there were people who on the chat were like, I'm in my early 20s. I just joined Salesforce. I thought drinking was part of the job. Like, I thought that that's like what we had to do to be successful in sales. But now you, Marin, and you, Chris, and all these leaders are standing up there saying, I'm sober and I'm in sales and you're successful, tells me that maybe I can be successful too. So here's what I would say. I would never have had the successful sales career that I have had if I was still drinking and using drugs. Full
Mm,
stop. I was not a good employee. I did not show up productive. I did not show up present. I was absent all the time because I was sick. And the energy that I can bring to my work because I'm clear-headed, because I get good sleep, because I have a foundation of recovery under me,
mm,
is what's made me an incredibly productive, successful seller. So, what I've learned in these situations is there's a lot. So, I'll try to keep it brief. No one cares if you're drinking or not drinking as long as you don't touch their drink. No one cares. Just don't touch mine. Have something in your hand at all times. Have a sparkly water, have a cranberry seltzer, have a mocktail, have something. Because I know for me, it feels awkward if my hands are empty and everyone else has a glass in their hand. So have something in your hand.
mhm,
Have an accountability partner before you walk into that client dinner and when you walk out. So have a sober friend that you're connecting with to keep yourself accountable and then leave or don't go if you don't feel safe. Because for me, if I were to drink at one of those events, for me, that's it. I'm going to throw away, and maybe not immediately, but in time, I will lose the job. I will lose my family. I will lose myself. And so it's just reframing what is my reason for being at this event?
mhm.
My reason for being at this event is not to drink, it's to form connections. It's to talk to the customer. It's to connect with colleagues. It's to be a leader for my team. And then when I feel like I'm at risk, then I get out of there. And no one has ever, in my 19 years of recovery, I have never had someone say to me, it was really too bad you left, Marin. Like, no one cares. Like,
Fair
they
enough.
don't care.
Yeah.
It doesn't mean, I don't mean that in a cold way, but just like, I think we tend to think we're more important than we are.
Yeah, I love it. I love it. And it's yeah, no one's watching your drink or what you're doing or whatever. And if they yeah, that's a great point to hold something just so you feel inclusive, even if it's a seltzer water, with a lemon, right?
Yep.
Nobody cares. And honestly, like how are you gonna feel the next day? That's kind of with me, it's like one drink, maximum two ever, and that's over a whole period of time because I don't want to feel crappy tomorrow. I got sleep, I got goals, I got exercise, I got a morning routine. Like it's your point, like that's not actually serving, the best version of me and helping me hit my goals. So I think that there's a lot more of that now is people that are just trying to strive to be healthier and more successful and they realize this isn't necessarily serving them with people like Andrew Huberman or people like
Mhm.
bringing visibility to what it takes to be successful and having some of these things not be part of it when they look at the brain science behind it. I'm curious kind of what you're seeing in 2024 with how prevalent is addiction in the US. You mentioned it's like 34 million or something,
46 million.
46
Let me
million.
break this down. I'm going to throw some stats at you, Ian, because I was floored by these. And I'm someone who's been in long-term recovery and I was flabbergasted, still am.
Mhm.
46 million qualifies having substance use disorder. That number is probably significantly underreported because
That's
how we
just
get that
alcohol and
data.
drugs. That's
This is
not
alcohol and drugs. First of all, it is
gambling.
not
That's
everything
not
else.
video
No,
games. That's not porn. That's not any of these
no,
other things that aren't a substance.
just
Just to
alcohol and
clarify.
drugs.
Got it. Got it.
46 million.
Okay.
And just self-reported data. So I
Mm,
don't know about you all, but when I was still drinking, I went to my primary care provider and it said on there, how many drinks do you have a week? I did not answer that honestly. I was like, what would a normal people person drink? I'll put that number down so you don't ask me any questions.
mm,
So we know that those numbers are underreported.
mm.
Of the 46 million, 70% are fully employed,
Wow.
which means that 1 in 10 employees, think about that, 10% of the workplace is actively struggling with untreated substance use disorder today.
And that's self-admitted. So
That's
probably a
self-admitted.
lot higher. And then you add
So
the other,
that is like
yeah.
the arguably the biggest disease condition that we are not talking about
Mhm.
in the workplace. And then it's two and three families.
Wow.
So now you've got, when we saw this in Sober Force, we had all of these parents of teenagers who were like, I'm freaked out about my kid. I know fentanyl's in the market. I'm so scared of what they're using. What do I do? What do I say? How do I help? I'm so scared about my sibling. I'm so scared about my parent.
Mhm.
Boomers have one of the highest rates of alcoholism. So we have a ton of people in the workplace who are totally distracted, even if not for their own use, but for a loved one because of that two and three family, who are consumed with how do I help navigate my loved one to the care that they need?
Mhm.
And that's what I think was really an aha moment for me with Sober Force was seeing how many employees were spending hours upon hours of their day trying to navigate care for a loved one, usually a child or a spouse, and not feeling like they knew where to go for help. So that's just as impactful in the workplace with productivity and absenteeism and
That one hits home as addiction is rampant in my family, and unfortunately lost my father when I was only 20
mm,
years old to addiction, and
mm,
it just I won't name people that are living, but there's a lot of
yeah,
active men, in my family who are still struggling with addiction, and I know even one of my clients, someone I talked to earlier today, his wife was struggling with alcohol, and a big part of the work we did was helping him be equipped to, support her, right? Because
yeah,
it was taking such a toll on how present he could be. So it's very
totally.
accurate. What do you think's going on? Why is addiction so prevalent right now?
Oh, I have so many ideas. I think COVID had a massive impact. So I think, this is a progressive disease, right? It gets worse, it doesn't get better. If you have substance use disorder, like it's not, you're not going to suddenly be like, "Oh, I'm drinking normally again." Like that's my belief. Like once you've tipped over into substance use disorder, like there's no going back.
I'm going to pause on that just for a minute. So is porn, right? Most people who watch porn don't just sit and watch it for a minute. It evolves into more frequent or
That's
more
right.
extreme or variety, or it evolves into physical. So for men out there who are listening, that could evolve into strip clubs, massage parlors, escorts, webcams,
That's right.
prostitution. There's a whole spectrum here.
Yep.
And
Because you need
heart is
more.
if your heart is beating, good, right?
Yeah.
Because it's an awareness sign, right? It
Yeah.
is, and this is a struggle that no one talks about with men.
Yeah.
Is well, porn?
Yeah.
No, it's all the other stuff that surrounds it, and most of it's done in secrecy. And a lot of these men are
Yeah.
in relationships, and in hiding this. So for me, nothing else but to destigmatize that, right? You're not alone, and
Thank you. Yeah.
that's that happened to me too. So addictions by
It,
nature, regardless if it's substance or process addiction, gambling, porn, video games, are progressive by nature because you're not getting the dopamine that you used to. So you seek more variety and more, frequency of it. And that's what leads to, oh, maybe I'll do something in person. Oh, maybe I want a live interactive woman on, you see it with OnlyFans. They made freaking $600 million. The CEO is a billionaire. Are you fucking kidding me? Like that kills me. The fact that
yeah.
men are looking at women that are not their partners in secret. And it just breaks my heart. And so if we can bring more awareness to the vast landscape of addiction, not just
Totally.
right
Yeah.
that to me, because I want everyone to know like this is not have one flavor or one shape or form. It is a variety of things that people can struggle with. So keep going with what.
Well, and there's also, I'm glad you named it because there is also overlap a lot of times, right? Cross addiction, and it loves to find a home. So if it can't find a home in porn, maybe it'll go find a home in shopping or go find a home in substances or right. And so it's the mindfulness around, am I checking out? Am I numbing out? Am I using substances or behaviors to numb out? So why I think this increase, I think COVID had a massive impact. We saw it in the numbers, we saw it in the overdoses. Um, there is 30 people who reported drinking, and I'm glad you're speaking to the porn. The numbers I know are really more around
No,
substance use
yeah, and
disorder.
again, my goal in bringing you on is
Yeah,
to destigmatize all
the
addictions.
full
'Cause I
thing.
coach hundreds of people and I hear it all. I'm their sales
Yeah,
therapist in a way, and it's
yeah.
again, it's rampant with
So
with.
stress is up, and then isolation during COVID, which is a perfect recipe for people turning to substances or addiction to numb out, to cope, right? And so then to what we talked about, because it's progressive disease, even though we're quote unquote out of COVID or we live with COVID now,
Mhm.
you've already progressed yourself to a different level than you were before. And so we're seeing fentanyl overdoses reduce finally this year, thank God, because there's less coming into the market now, which is great.
Great.
Alcohol use disorder still kills way more people every year than any other drugs.
Mhm.
And so I think that's a piece that I always want to bring awareness to is there's a lot of focus around opioid use disorder, but alcohol is still has been there all along and is still killing way more people. So we need solutions for all of it. We need solutions for all of it. And we need, I think community is the piece that really will help community and the stigma, breaking down stigma by having these conversations, bringing visibility, understanding that there are 21 million of us in recovery. 21 million. That's a lot of people
Mhm.
in recovery who have stories to share. So my hope is that by sharing my own story and you sharing your story, we inspire someone else to share their story because that's how we break stigma and that's how we make it easier to access help sooner. Like, let's stop waiting till it's a crisis.
I think that's a good point, and a couple things. So I want to destigmatize. Just know that a lot of people drawn to sales have addictive personalities, and that doesn't go away. Like you said, it just has to find a new home. Even with someone who doesn't use substances or
Yeah.
vices, I pretty much can proudly say, that I've stopped all of that for the past, since I've been sober 4.5 years. I still find myself right grabbing my phone, for example, and I have to consciously put it down because it's like I need that dopamine
Hmm.
or exercising, running marathons, setting really big exercise goals, or working. So you don't lose your personality. You just can channel it to other things that maybe are more healthy and more self-serving versus self-destructive and self-sabotaging. So that's one thing I just want to call out is the addictive personality um, is going to manifest and show itself in a variety of ways, some healthy, some unhealthy, and you just have to choose where you want to point that and channel it, but you don't necessarily change your personality. At least that hasn't been my experience. And
Hmm.
then the second thing is the variety of support groups. So you're talking about community. There are groups for people who struggle with gaming. There are groups of people who struggle with Adderall, very specifically, or stimulants. It's not just alcohol or
Hmm.
drugs, right? There are micro communities. I know even within compulsive sexual behavior, there's young men against porn, right? And there's groups of people that are there, or there's groups of married men that just want to have the highest integrity in their relationship. So there's such a variety of communities and groups where people know they're not alone and can, get the support they need in this specific area. Can you speak to kind of the importance of community and what that looks like, and maybe what you're doing around it?
Totally, absolutely. So for me personally, I've been a member of 12-step program since I walked into my sobriety journey 19 years ago, and I still am a very active member, and that is my foundation. I also have been a part of other communities that have been mixed in over the years, right? Other faith communities and female leader communities, and things that are separate from specifically talking about addiction, but is community and connection. So for me, and there's a great TED talk on this about the opposite of addiction is connection.
Yes.
And that
Amen.
just rings so true for me that my addiction wants me alone and isolated, and that's where it can prey on me. I do better when I'm connected to others and have shared commonalities. So whatever that thing is, I feel like just community period is super important. And I do think you're coming around the phones. It's like, yes, we can sit in a room, but just be on our phones, and it's super isolating. And it kind of freaks me out, honestly, when I watch groups of teenagers not talking and just looking at phones because that is how, anyways, I think that's where we become prone and to addiction, whatever form. So I think community is super important. What we're doing at Sobrynth, so the work that jumping into the work I'm doing today, I co-founded a company this year called Sobrynth, and we're working with companies to bring benefit to companies for employees and families. Half of our solution is community and in creating recovery friendly community in the workplace because we know that that's where we can reach people. Given that stat of 1 in 10 and 2 and 3 families, it's like we want to be there helping these workplaces create communities. So if you are someone who's interested in doing this in your workplace, find me on LinkedIn, please. We would love to talk and talk to your workplace about this. And then the other part of the solution is aligning people to peer coaches who have lived experience in recovery and can help care navigate to take that, burden of how do I even find a community? What does that mean? What's the right community for me? There are lots of pathways. It is not just 12 step and it is not just clinical. There are lots of spaces to go, but trying to figure it out on your own is really hard. So our goal at Sobrynth is to take that weight off of people, to help them, to be in the journey with them,
Hmm.
and to help their workplace know what it means and how to live being a recovery-friendly workplace.
I love it. And I'm grateful for the work you're doing to
Thanks.
help people feel like they can have support at their companies. I know for me, when I got sober, that was a immediate conversation that I talked to my boss about and my boss's boss. Again, thank you to Dallas and Jen. They were so supportive in me helping, get the support I need for my family first and foremost. So you'd be amazed at what can happen, but a lot of people think they'll get fired if they share some of this stuff. So thanks for the work and helping companies have resources and make this something a little more normalized for companies.
Yeah.
For people that might be sober curious or might be struggling, but or maybe not
Yeah.
that rock bottom, what are some of the signs that that you might be struggling or have an addiction or maybe
Yeah.
look into getting some help? What are some of the signs you've seen?
So I'm so glad you asked this because when we launched Sobrynth, we were like, why is it so hard to find a quiz online to assess use? Like, that's the first thing I looked for when I was starting to explore my own relationship with alcohol and drugs. I was like,
Mhm.
where's the quiz to tell me if I have a problem? So we put the set of questions on our website. So if any of you want to go look at Sobrynth.com, look at the Start Here tab. I'll just read a couple to you, Ian. We have 5 questions on there.
Mhm.
And basically, if you answer yes to any of them, we encourage you to reach out, right? So the questions are things like, have you ever felt the need to cut down on fill in the blank, whether it's drinking, porn, right? Whatever the thing is. Have you ever felt the need to cut
Smoking
down?
weed. Smoking weed's a big
Smoking
one because it's
weed.
legal and a lot of people have a love-hate
Yep.
relationship with weed. So throwing out there.
Legal doesn't mean it's always safe for everyone. It's great
Yeah.
that it's legal, but it doesn't mean it's always safe. Okay, so have you ever felt the need to cut down? In the past 12 months, has anyone ever expressed concern about your use?
Mhm.
Have you ever been able to unable to control the amount or frequency
Mhm.
of your use? So these are signals
Tell
that are
yourself,
like,
you tell yourself you're going to stop and you keep going back.
yep,
This is the last time, or I'm trying to minimize it.
constant.
Yeah.
I
So,
would drink when I was happy. I drink when I was sad. I drink when I was bored. It didn't matter. And I would always try to find a reason. Well, it's because I'm with this person or because this happened. And it was like at the end of the day, I was doing it because I couldn't not,
yeah.
right? I'd
What are
lost
the
that
other,
ability of
what are the other
choice.
two if you have them handy?
Oh, okay. So in the past 12 months, have you engaged in drinking or using drugs or fill in the blank addiction alone in the morning or outside of social situations? And the
Alone.
last one was in the past 12 months, have you been unable to meet work, family, or social obligations due to your fill in the blank?
So any one of those, if you answered
Any
one,
one of
could be
those.
a sign. That's super helpful for sure. And
And it's like, oh, sorry, go ahead.
no, I was going to say that it's like they're all kind of like there's some shame around each of those questions to tie back of like how you feel about that activity.
And here's the thing for me that I'm so grateful for is that because I had the example of sobriety in my family, I knew there was another path I could take.
Hmm.
And that was a gift because not everyone gets that example, right? And so, I think the message, and it's probably coming across loud and strong, is like your bottom can be your bottom. It doesn't have to be, I'm going to wait till I lose everything.
Yeah.
I didn't have to lose my apartment, my friends, my job, but I was pretty miserable and
Hmm.
I couldn't stop. And I didn't know how. And I was freaked out that I was going to put myself in a situation where I was going to die. And that's enough pain, right? I was not someone who had the external circumstances removed, but the internal was a mess.
Hmm.
And I'm grateful
Was
that
there
that was enough for me,
was there
you
something that
know?
happened like a moment or a day where you're just like, I'm done, or was it
Oh
just
yes. Oh yes. My birthday is May 5th and it was 2005, so my birthday that year was 555.
Mhm.
And I looked online like, oh, there must be special meaning to this. Of course, I thought my ego was like, you're very important because your birthday's five. So I looked online and I read I had a wish day on May 8th And May 8th arrived, and I was still horribly hungover and had a man in my bed whose name I didn't know. And I was terrified. And I woke up and I just felt this pit of in my stomach of like, I am literally going to get myself killed. I'm living in Brooklyn, New York at the time, and I'm 24, and I just knew I had no control. None, zero. There was no control within me around substances. So I wished for clarity. And I had a total moment of grace of seeing two pathways that I could walk. And one pathway had my dad and my uncles at the end of it. And I always get choked up when I tell the story. And the other pathway had the other family member who was still using. And it didn't feel like an easy choice. Because I'm like, in one path, I have to give up my best friend alcohol and weed. In the other path, I get to keep that, but I lose everything else.
Mhm.
And luckily, I picked up the phone and I called my parents and I said, I think I have a drinking problem and I need help. And my dad knew how to help me because he had gone through this himself. And so he was able to say, call your cousin, go to a meeting, don't drink, do this every day, right? And so I just did it and it worked. And I haven't had a drink or a drug since then. And that's such a gift because it means my husband's never seen me drunk. My kids have never seen me drunk. That'll make me cry. Like that's a huge gift. And
Yeah.
if my dad hadn't gotten sober and my uncles hadn't gotten sober, they both grew up with alcoholic parents. Like we broke the chain of addiction in our family. And I hope my kids don't have to go through the suffering. But what I can give them are tools that I've gained and how to healthy cope with emotions, with stress, with grief, how to make feelings feel safe.
Mm.
Um, and do the best I can there. And their journey is going to be their journey, but at least they've seen me as a sober mom. And that's really the best I can hope for is like just demonstrating to others I'm still human. I am not perfect. There's no perfection in this deal, right? But like, I don't need to use drugs and alcohol to deal with life.
It ran in my family until it ran into me.
Oh, I love that. Yes. Yeah.
The work you do is the work your children won't have to do.
Yeah, I hope so. I'll mess them up in some other way, Ian. There's guarantee. I
Like,
mean,
nobody's
we're
perfect.
all human, but like,
It resonates. It resonates with my story too. I have two little boys, and unfortunately, I was as a little boy exposed to porn early on, saw things
mm,
I shouldn't have seen, right? And it was imprinted in my brain and normalized. And my kids won't have that. They won't have
yeah,
that, in our household. And I think it speaks volumes. And they won't see me drunk. They won't smell alcohol. They won't, it's interesting. But the work your parents didn't do is the work you have to do. But you had a parent,
yeah.
father that did do the work. And so you saw
Thank
that.
God.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's powerful that you saw that crossroads when you did. Do you think from your experience people do have to hit a bottom, or you feel like people can, from what you see when they get there, they can stop when they can see the signs that it maybe is
I
getting
think it just depends on how you're wired. Like what
yeah.
I loved about Sober Force was like, and now with Sobrynth is, that there are lots of different reasons why people stop
Mhm.
or what sober means to them, like what you said, right? Like sobriety can mean a different thing for every person.
Yes.
And
Yes.
I loved hearing the stories of people who are like, yeah, I just don't drink because like I just feel gross when I drink and I don't like feeling gross. And I'm like, as someone who's in recovery from substance use disorder, I'm like, I don't understand that at all. I had to feel like suicidally depressed and like completely out of control to say this is enough. And you just feel better when you wake up in the morning. That's enough for you. Okay. Like I respect it. My husband's that way. He's like, I don't know. I'm like, do you want to drink? He's like, no, I feel like crap when I drink.
Mhm.
I don't get it.
I
So
don't
he
know
doesn't
anyone
need a
who feels
program.
amazing the next day when they drink.
Yeah, he just like doesn't because he feels better, which is great. And by the way, there are lots of people like that who fall in that category who in the workplace feel pressured to drink because you're at the happy hour or you're doing a champagne toast for company kickoff. And like that's the piece that I hope to change with Sobrynth is helping companies be more safe and inclusive for people, whatever their reason is for not. Lots of people just don't want to drink because they just feel better when they don't. But yet we still default to it as the bonding mechanism for teams or for entertaining. And it's just not needed. Like you can do a volunteer project together and have an awesome time building bikes for kids. And that can be a better bonding than a toast at a happy hour, right?
Yeah, I honestly, like, you're hitting home with the alcohol thing for me. There's a reason I haven't gotten drunk in 4.5 years, and I genuinely believe alcohol lets in the demons, right? When you put alcohol in there, like, all morals, values, all, principles, guiding principles go out the window. And I just remember some of these SKOs where I was drunk and I ended up at a strip club, or I ended up, just doing
Yeah.
shit that is, I'm like, oh my God, and it really is the gateway, right, to a lot of other things,
Mm.
that I think, people can get in a lot of trouble for, whether it's driving drunk, or whether it's cheating
Sexual
on
harassment.
cheating on their spouse, sexual harassment. You see that in the workplace all the time, and it's just
Yep.
sickening. It really is. And you'll see that with a lot of bosses, or people putting their employees in uncompromising situations. I have someone I coach. I can't say anything, but like, they senior leader in their company had, put them in a very unfair position at one of these events, who was drunk and touching and all kinds of stuff. And it's in when I shared that, I found out a lot of other women had gone through a similar type of experience. And there's a lot of men, I'm going to point the finger at men behaving badly, right? In certain situations where, their guard is let down or whatever. I know
Mhm.
there's no excuse, but I don't know if you've seen that or heard that in the tech
So
sales
much.
world, but
As a woman who is often the only woman in a space of being an enterprise seller starting, a long time ago. Yes, unfortunately, yes, I have experienced it directly myself. I have watched other members get experience with, have that experience, reach out to me. I still get calls from people. What do I do? Do I call HR? I don't feel like there's any point. Are they even
right.
going to listen to me? Like, am I going to lose my job?
Hmm.
So it's really tricky because it's like I'm very cautious to not be the anti-drinking police because I think there's plenty of people who can drink safely and not make stupid, harmful decisions when they're drinking. But I also think we could do a better job of giving choice and giving inclusive spaces. So a great example is like being at Salesforce's company kickoff before I left Salesforce. And for the first time ever, there was non-alcoholic sparkling juice in a champagne glass right next to the champagne, clearly labeled. And for
Sure.
the first time in my sales career, I could toast everyone to company kickoff with a non-alcoholic drink. And I felt so seen in that moment because I'm like, someone on the events team took the time to work with catering to ensure that there was non-alcoholic champagne poured and labeled. And
Mm.
that meant that other people who have no problem drinking or not drinking could also choose the NA option. But for me, it meant that I didn't, my anxiety fell off a cliff because I now had something to hold in my hand and feel a part of, as
Yeah.
opposed to like a plastic water bottle, you know? Like those small changes make massive impact on
Yeah.
people's lives.
Feeling like you're not
And yeah,
feeling like you're seen and heard, and you're not different than everyone.
yes,
That's
like
what,
someone took time to
yeah.
make this event inclusive. And how cool is that? Like it is those little changes in the workplace that make a massive difference.
I want to open it to questions in a couple minutes. I know you guys have been
Yeah.
holding questions, but a couple of things just to wrap up before we get to Q&A. First is, besides community, what is the elixir for addiction recovery for people who are struggling? What are some of the things that you found in 19 years, almost 20? Congratulations on that. What are some of the things that help people who are struggling with addiction, besides the community piece?
Oh my gosh. It's so hard to put that into like one statement. I think my journey has been, for me, there has been a big spiritual component to it. That is not the only pathway. I don't want that to be perceived as the only pathway. There are lots of pathways. For me, spirituality and exploration of spirituality, like very broad and roomy for me, as far as like how I explore that, has been a big part.
Mhm,
Because again, it comes back to connection. So community, but also connection with self.
mhm,
So that means, therapy, and it means different spiritual practices, and it means meditation, and it means moving my body, and it means eating good food and getting good sleep. And like, it is a whole person care. And that can feel really overwhelming if you're far from that. You're doing very little care. So it's like, start with one thing, go for a walk every day,
mhm,
right? Just even step outside and have the sunshine on your face before you start your crazy sales day. Like those moments of self-care, self-love is, I think, the elixir because me using substances to numb out was really so much self-harm. And so I have to daily practice self-love.
Yeah.
And that form can be different day to day, but
Oh,
that's what it really comes down
I
to.
want to I want to share my screen again. This will be on YouTube, but I'm owning it, right? I had multiple addictions, and for anyone who has multiple addictions or people that have struggles, I have a module in my program that I talk about. It's always hard to talk about it, but it's called addition by subtraction. And I don't want this just to be for people who are in my program. I want it to be everyone. So this was me prior to 2020, prior to February, is I had a variety of addictions. And you see the top one is what we talked about, but also getting drunk, Adderall, gaming, social media, content overconsumption, staying up late, right? If some of this stuff looks familiar, just know that you're not alone. Um, and what I had to do is I stopped all of them within a very short period and replaced it with connection. So you mentioned quality family time, talk about relationship time, right? Time with your significant other. Me and my wife still have lunch every single day. And, I've taken all this energy all this stuff in the left was done isolated, and the stuff in the right is for connection, growth, filling the soul, right? The self-love, cooking, running, learning, prayer, the spiritual, meditation, and journaling, therapy, recovery, and all in on serving others with my coaching business. So again, it's not that you just stop doing these things, it's that you replace them with other things that are filling the soul. And that's the important thing that I want everyone to know is that you're not alone, and there's a lot of different things you can do. Once you stop doing this, you're not just sitting by yourself, and you're not just sitting in isolation, right? You're replacing these activities that you're subtracting with addition. You're replacing it with other more positive things that fill the soul, that give you connection, that help you strengthen your spiritual relationship. These are all things that you're so critical to your success. So that addition by subtraction for me is everything. It's don't just subtract it and then sit with yourself with this angst, with this addiction. Channel it. Go for walks. Go in the sun. Go, be with your children, right? Sit with the feeling and do something positive that fills your soul and helps you connect with other people. So we lost Marin for a minute, but she's back.
I'm back. I'm sorry. Of
Oh,
course,
you're
my
good. I
internet
was showing a
crashed.
slide, so it worked out perfectly because I was showing the addition by subtraction slide. So we're going to open it up to the group now. But before we do, any place if people want to learn more about Sobrynth or get support, where can you direct them to?
Yes, please do add me on LinkedIn. Follow us on LinkedIn, Sobrynth. It's like Sober Labyrinth, Sobrynth. Visit our website. Again, if you have a company you're at and you want to bring this forward, we'd love to talk. So definitely reach out to us.
And what made you leave sales, like pursuing you were in a leadership VP position to go start Sober. And I imagine you're making great money. You had stock options. I'm just curious, like that's a
Listen, Ian, you don't do this work because of the money. No, I think this business model is going to be very successful. So I do actually think what we're bringing to the world is very much needed. And we're talking to lots of very large companies. We are already live with national employers. Um, so it was a risk worth taking on myself and on this marketplace because it's just an empty marketplace and it needs to be solved for. And yes, I walked away from a massive salary and career path that I was on. But for me, I was like, I couldn't not do this because it felt so needed that I just felt like if I didn't try, I would always wonder
Mhm.
what would have happened. And because I was really successful in sales for a long time, I saved a bunch of money and it gave me the ability to take this bet on myself, you know?
That's what
It's
I
like
always
that's
tell people. Do great in sales so you don't have to do sales forever and you can
and
follow your
don't live above your
passion.
means. Save your
Yeah.
money. Like that's the best advice I can give is like enjoy it, but also like put it aside because now I'm getting to spend it on supporting my family while I go about this work.
Thank you. Thank you for the work you're doing. I think it's
Yeah.
well needed, and I really do, again, from the bottom of my heart, you're doing God's work, and that's why I want to get you exposure and sober the exposure for so many people. So hopefully this is hitting home. For the Q&A portion, I just want to maintain anonymity for anyone who wants to talk or ask questions or get support, and you want your Q&A removed from the recording, just let me know. And when we edit it, we'll take it out. I want people to feel very safe and comfortable. And I know this is on YouTube. So with this point, let's get your questions answered. Let's get some support, and we'll open the floor now. I know Meg had her hand up earlier, so you can go ahead and you'll be first, and then put your hand up if you want to just ask any questions to Marin.
Yeah. Thanks, Ian, and thanks, Marin. Your company and your mission is so cool because, I mean, I've never heard of anything like this actually, and everyone on this call can totally attest. And you said it too, like anywhere you go in sales, like they even make like funny jokes about it where like sales reps are just like addicted to like Adderall, coffee, and like beer because that's like all you consume when you're
Corporate
working
bro,
with
you got to
people.
see some corporate bro stuff because he has a lot on
Yeah.
it.
Yeah, it's like all on corporate bro. It's funny, but like at times it can, I mean, it's so dangerous. And
Mm.
um when you were talking about community and it being huge, just as someone who might be like a sober curious person, because I am like your husband, I feel so much better. I perform so much better when I'm clear-headed and I'm not like coming off a weekend bender. Or like had happy hour the night before. Like, did you feel like you lost some of your community when you
Mm.
went sober? And not like drinking buddies, but like girlfriends that like you would also like hang out with all the time, but like also would go out and drink with. Or
Yeah, great
you done
question.
sober. Yeah.
Thank you for that. Yeah, there were definitely friends that fell to the wayside where it was clear that what we were connected with was our getting high together or going to the bar together. And like I made peace with even when it was hard to lose those friendships, looking back, I could say like they weren't grounded in like genuine, authentic connection.
Yeah.
And I found so many amazing friends through who are sober and not sober, like now, because I connect on a real level versus like a superficial, let's go to a happy hour and like get drunk together. Like, it's just those aren't the relationships I seek today. And
Mhm.
so um I guess I would just recommend like trusting that other people will come into your life
Mhm.
that are the ones meant to be there if certain friends fall to the wayside or don't understand it, right? It's like take care of you, and
Yeah.
that will lead to genuine relationships in the future.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. That's awesome
And
feedback.
I could
And
echo that,
advice.
Meg. When I got sober, even if it wasn't directly related to my sobriety, there were other friends that I just got high with or drunk with.
Mhm.
And unfortunately, I just don't hang out with them anymore because I recognize that they were a way for me to escape and not have to deal with the feelings that I was feeling. So people will
Mhm.
inherently fall out. That again, it's not just does this serve me, it's does this person serve the best version of me too. And when you decide to get sober or face your demons, you're going to see that certain people will be less prevalent in your life, and that's
Mhm.
and that's a good thing. Cole, you're up, and then Bobby.
Yeah, like Meg said, this has been super helpful. One thing I wanted to ask is, what if someone reaches out to you that, they're struggling with something, whatever it is? I've had coworkers, friends reach out to me, and I don't necessarily feel like I can always relate. So I was just curious if there's a best place to, start or send them somewhere, or maybe it's Sobrynth or what that looks like.
Yeah, I mean, first of all, I'm glad that to hear you're a friend that people feel safe with. You should feel good about that. That people trust you and feel like they can come to you. That says a lot about who you are. Uh, I think being a supportive ear, you don't have to have all the answers. And I think that where you can point someone to is if someone's open to a 12-step program, those are free and available everywhere in every single community all over the world. And that's an easy place to start to find other people who have been on this journey too. You could even offer to go with them for their first one if that's helpful. I think what was helpful to me with friends when I was exploring it was the friends were like, well, cool, like let's not go to the bar, let's go for a walk together, or let's go to a park, or let's go get coffee. And so friends who were willing to go other spaces that were safe for me meant everything because I didn't know how to exist without alcohol as that thing we use to connect. So I think being a friend where you can, unfortunately for Sobrynth today, we are not direct to consumer yet. Maybe one day we will be today or through employers, but they can still definitely go to our website and read the survey and questions. And there are also always recovery community organizations. So if you Google recovery community organization in your community, like the name of your city, there will be a phone number there, and that's a service available for free to anyone to help them get plugged into communities locally.
Yeah, if you just Google in overcoming blank addiction, fill in the blank, you will see the 12-step groups for it, right? Or you could put 12-step blank addiction, literally from work to gaming to any specific narcotics, right? So there's going to be an anonymous group for nearly any of the main addictions that people tend to struggle with. So you can start there or just start on Google and look at some of the support groups. They're everywhere. I mean, again, 46 million, right? There's a lot of, that's just with substances. So good place to start is
And Cole, I want to acknowledge like your question of like, if I don't know how to relate, like that's okay. And I think, just being able to say like, hey, I love you. I support you. I appreciate your coming to me. How can I be helpful to you? Do you want me to not drink with you at this happy hour we're going to for work tonight? Like, do you want me to leave? Tell me when you want to leave. I'll leave with you, whatever your own personal boundaries are around it. But like, there are so many ways that you can still just be a supportive friend, even if you don't have lived experience with it. We just want to be acknowledged and supported. Like, I don't need my friends to know exactly what it's like. I just need to know that they love me and they're there for me.
it's a beautiful answer. Let's take Bobby. Next question.
Yeah, so again, I want to just thank you for what you're doing. And mine is a comment and then a quick question, and that is that I am just like your husband is, where I just don't like the way I feel, and I started to realize that I didn't need alcohol to make me fun, that I could be myself.
Mhm.
So I that dawned on me because I was able to hang out with friends and see that they didn't really notice that I wasn't drinking. But my question to you is, like, how do you handle, because I work at Salesforce, and it is like you're entertaining, you're taking customers out. How do you handle the customer, or how did you handle the customer interactions in the past? Like that, I guess that's something I'm still trying to own up, because sometimes they want to drink the hard liquor, they want to go in, and you don't want to fit in, you don't want to, and you kind of almost get pressured. So
Mm.
overcome that, because I'm sure you probably dealt with it, and that must have been so challenging for you. So I'll drop off, but thank you so much.
Thank you. Go join Sober Force. They're running strong. They just did a bunch of events at Dreamforce. Like, again, it's not just for people fully abstinent, for sober curious, sober allies, like wanting to learn more. Like, so go join the group is where I'm going to start, because you're at Salesforce. Yes, all the time dealt with this constantly, of course. I'm sure a lot of people assumed I was pregnant when I wasn't, for why I wasn't drinking. How did I deal with it? I would just say, I don't drink. And like most people go, oh, good for you. The ones who are concerned about their own drinking say, ask a lot of questions. Oh, why not? Did something happen? Did you get a DUI? Like why don't, like they're self-assessing. And so for me, and again, it's all personal preference and personal comfort, but for me, it was just easier for me to be like, oh yeah, no, I don't drink, or I'm not drinking tonight, and just leave it at that. And like, people are uncomfortable sometimes because they're questioning their own use, and so those are the ones who can get kind of squirmy and uncomfortable, but they move on. You change the subject, you find something else to talk about. Um, and then sometimes those people will come back around and say, I'm worried about my son, or I'm wondering about my own drinking. So listen, I've had a very successful enterprise sales career. My deals were never blocked because I didn't have a wine with the customer or drink whiskey after dinner with the customer. Like, I never lost deals because of it. I probably won deals because I retained all the information from every single client dinner I went to. Right. Like, it did not block me from having a successful career to not drink with the customer, is what I can offer.
I love it. I love it. And I'll just say, like, you'd be amazed at how many executives or senior leaders are sober. in my previous company and Salesforce, some of the most respected leaders I had were sober. And I think it goes a long way to say, the people that work on themselves, the people that are constantly trying to show up their best, right? A lot of them are aware of struggles in these areas, and they work on them, and that's what gives people their edge, right? Because they could be more clear-headed, more healthy, more um, able to deal with their emotions, right? Able to connect with their people. So give it a try. If you're sober curious, give it a try. Abstain from that thing for a month and see how you're able to do. Start there. It doesn't need to be all or nothing, right? Although
Mhm.
certainly that for many people is the only option. It's about your own relationship, and I'd encourage you to go out and don't wait for that rock bottom. And if you are feeling some of these, if you take that test and you see that you have a couple of the ones where you said yes to, that's probably a good sign that maybe your relationship with the substance or the addiction is no longer serving you. So I don't see any more questions right now. So I think I just want to say, Marin, thank you so much. Thank you to everyone who's joined in today. And, if you're listening, just know that you're not alone. There is a path. There is a path to recovery. There's a path to becoming the person you've always wanted to be. There's a path, and it looks different for everyone. But you're meant for greatness. And if something holds you back, right? That work that you do in conquering your demons is going to make you prepared and able to go conquer anything else in the world. And often that's the best place to start. I know for my own business, when I did that, anything else was possible. When I became sober, it was like the confidence was through the roof. So if nothing else for that, right? It's very powerful, and for your families and for your children's, and to
Mhm.
break the generational curse that Marin's talking about, because this stuff does run in families, and you're not alone. So anything you want to share with the listeners before we say goodbye, Marin?
No, I just so appreciate you all showing up for a conversation that, I know can feel probably uncomfortable or whatever the feeling is that arose, just that I'm grateful that you all showed up for it and made time for it and are showing up for yourselves. And again, please connect with me on LinkedIn. I'd love to know each of you. And thanks, Ian, for having me and making space for this.
You can connect with me too. If anything I said resonated, send me a message. I talk to people all the time, men who have some of the same struggles, and it's not part of my coaching program, but just to help people walk this path. Many people in our community have walked this path, right? It's um, secrecy and shame is where addiction thrives. So the more
Yep.
you can talk about it and open up and get support, the less of a grip it's going to have on you. And the most free person in the world is the one with nothing to hide. So that's I'll leave you with that. And we're here for you in any capacity, both me and Marin. Please reach out. And thank you guys so much for showing up. And I hope this is helpful for everyone. Take care.
Thank
Thanks,
you so
everyone.
much.
Bye.